Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Monday, November 17th around here, and we got a lot to catch up on. Oklahoma gets a massive win down there in Tuscaloosa, beats Alabama for the second year in a row, and adds a lot of questions in the SEC in terms of the CFP. Georgia just absolutely throttles Texas for the third time in a row. Well, second one was not so much a throttling, but at the end of the day, gets their third straight win over Texas, this one in dominating fashion, 35-10. And then we'll talk about USC getting a massive win over Iowa, one that they really had to fight for, and definitely gained a lot of respect for USC. Then we'll get to some upset alerts, and we'll talk with the one. We'll talk about Texas A&M making history in the SEC, coming back from 27 down at halftime to win over South Carolina 31-30. Georgia Tech came back to get a big time win. Michigan had a really weird game over there in Wrigley and got a win over Northwestern, and then a couple other teams went down to totally take them out of the CFP race. And then we just got a little bit of a whip around. All the big dogs kind of rolled this past weekend. A couple of at-large hopefuls definitely got the message this week as well. And then we got Virginia getting a big-time win and avoiding kind of a doomsday scenario in the ACC, a massive upset of South Florida, and what that means for the group of five going forward. We will get to it all, but let's go ahead and jump into this, and we'll start with the big three games of the weekend, at least as far as I'm concerned. Now, we will talk about Texas A&M. Wanted to make sure I started the next segment with them, so we will get to that, I promise. But let's go ahead and jump into what I tend to believe is the most impressive win, probably the most impactful outcome of this past weekend. Oklahoma wins 23-21 over Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Wow. What a weird game in a number of different ways. John Mateer goes for 138 passing, 23 yards rushing, including a massive touchdown run. And then Ty Simpson's 326, one touchdown, two turnovers on the day. The Oklahoma defensive line continues to be the best position group maybe in the entire country. Now, the Ohio State receivers, there's a lot of really, really good ones. The Oklahoma defensive line being able to do that without R. Mason Thomas is absolutely ridiculous. They were in Ty Simpson's face pretty much constantly throughout that game. 4 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. Ty Simpson never got comfortable. And I think that's the big thing when we talk about Alabama, and we talked about it pretty much all year. Ty Simpson has to be incredible for this team to be really, really good. This team is not going to be the incredible, rounded offense that we kind of expected it to be coming into the season. They can't run the football, plain and simple, and they're not going to be able to run the football going forward. That's not going to magically click on in week 11 or week 12 or week 13. They are going to have to find ways around it, and really the way around it is Ty Simpson playing at a Heisman level. It was always going to come down at some point. There was always going to be a performance that was just a little bit off, a little bit off kilter, and you got a really good defense on the other side. Now, I thought they would be able to walk that tightrope in this game, much like Texas did earlier in the season against Oklahoma, but Oklahoma came in prepared. They came in with a more healthy John Mateer. I don't know how much more healthy, still think he's relatively limited, but at the end of the day, they get a massive win, and at the end of the day, it's an Alabama team that after that loss to Florida State looked like an entirely new team, looked like they might be able to win a national title. The reality of that was they were always a flawed team. They were always a team that was one-dimensional and was hanging on their quarterback being an absolutely incredible player, and he still very well is. This was just a tough matchup and one of those days where things just did not go his direction. That was going to happen at some point for Alabama, and this was the one that got them. As for Oklahoma, there's something that needs to be said after this one, and it's not necessarily a bad thing for Oklahoma moving forward. Just to their fans, buckle up, because this is not going to be a pretty next two games. Now, you very well should win those two games. You will be favored against Missouri. You will be favored against LSU. You will have every chance to go 10-2, be a shoe-in for the playoffs, and maybe host a game depending on what happens around you. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be pretty. The run game is not going to be great, especially against elite units like the defensive line for Missouri coming up this weekend. John Mateer is not the player that he was early on in the season, whether that's injury-based or just he's playing SEC opponents every week and things are getting a little bit quick for him, whatever that looks like. The offense is not going to lift you to wins. You're not going to win 41-17, although now that I said that, they'll probably win 41-17 this weekend. Regardless, I think you're going to have to rock fight your way to wins. I think you're going to have to win in the margins. I think you're going to have to turn people over, and that's what you did in this game. you got to do it 2 more times. I think you are more than capable of doing it. Just to say for Oklahoma fans, these next 2 games, while I believe you are going to win them, or at least as of right now, I believe you are going to win them, you better buckle up because I don't see this team blowing out anyone the rest of the way. For Alabama, I feel like they have to feel like this one got away. You outgain a team almost 2-1. You turn over the ball a number of times. Just one of those games that you feel like you probably should have won, and another one of those games, probably the same way they felt about Florida State. So they're now in a weird position because if this thing ends the way that it's sitting right now, where Vanderbilt gets to 10 wins, now they would have the tiebreaker over them. They would be fine there. But Oklahoma's at 10 wins. You got Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, or Georgia, Ole Miss, A&M up there with 11 wins at the top of the conference. That Florida State game becomes a massive data point, and it becomes a massive data point that really could hurt you at the end of the year. It's no longer just the anomaly where you become a better team, you've totally learned from that. Now it's something that we have to use and measure you against these other 2 lost teams, and there's going to be quite a few of them, whether it's Miami or Utah or any of these teams. Now, them being number 4, they probably will not fall below those 2 teams. I would have to imagine they'll sit somewhere in the 9 to 10, maybe 8 range in this upcoming rankings on Tuesday that we'll talk about on Wednesday, but it's a big data point now. The Florida State game is now a massive, massive thing that you're going to have to overcome in some respects. I still think you're fine for the playoff if you win out, but the reality is there's going to be a lot of teams vying for that spot, and a lot of people in that room are now going to be bringing up that Florida State game, and it's going to matter a whole lot more than it did when that was the only loss on your schedule. But tons of respect to Oklahoma and Brent Venables. After the Texas game, I think a lot of people, including myself, look forward at the rest of the schedule and just said, it's going to be too hard. I think they're a very good team. I think they're talented. I think they had the ability to do this. But at the end of the day, I thought they were just going to face too many hurdles at once. Now they've won at Tennessee. They've won at Bama. They go to Missouri this weekend. Then they get LSU at home. You got no wiggle room. I can promise you that. Because of that loss to Texas, they would then be that 9-3 team. We can talk about that on Wednesday. I think Texas is fully out of it. But regardless, Oklahoma has no wiggle room. We just talked about it. Going to be way too crowded of a bubble to have that 3rd loss. So win the next 2 games. Oklahoma's firmly in. Lose one of them, and you're on the outside looking in after you felt like you're probably on your way right about now. Georgia just took Texas to the woodshed, and a lot of people will tell you that game came down to 3 plays, and I'm not arguing that 4th and 1 by Gunnar Stockton to Chauncey Bowens, the 4th and 5 where Colin Simmons jumped off sides, and that onside kick were the changing points of this game. That cannot be argued. That's not the 3 plays that this game came down to. It was all the other plays where Texas couldn't run the football, where the offense looked entirely out of sync, and where their defense was on the field a whole lot late in that football game and just got exposed a couple of times, being out of position, not having your eyes in the right place, having youthful players just not be ready for that moment. That's kind of what unfolded, and Steve Sarkisian has a Kirby Smart problem. The same way Kirby Smart has an Alabama problem, Texas might just have a Georgia problem. They have 83 rushing yards in the 3 matchups that they've played the last 13 months. They in those games, they have 3 of the 4 lowest yards per carry under Steve Sarkisian against Georgia. In every matchup, Kirby Smart has made the decisions that Steve Sarkisian has not seen coming, and that's why Georgia's been able to win the game. 2 of them on special teams, the massive fake punt in the SEC championship last year, the onside kick this year. There's something that has to change at that Texas program. It's very hard to say what it is. I think personnel changes are bound to come, especially on that offensive line, especially in that secondary. There will be a lot of work in the portal to be done. I think some staff changes will come, whether that's position coaches. Adding a coordinator is obviously on the table as you get deeper into the season. Now, Sarkisian has been a little bit steadfast in his idea that he wants to keep that position. His hand might be forced at some point here pretty soon to go get a new offensive coordinator to just solely devote time to that. It should be said that the Texas program is not burning. The Texas program is still in a very good spot. I believe Steve Sarkisian is the guy to kind of lead them out of this and kind of steady the ship, as it were. But there's a lot of things that have to happen for Texas to be at the level that Georgia is right now, and that's where they want to be. So we'll see what happens there. Plenty of time to talk about that in the offseason and as the rest of this season unfolds. But this next 2 weeks is a culture test for this Steve Sarkisian Texas team, and we'll see if they pass it or not. But as for the actual game, from the second that Ryan Wingo dropped that third down pass on the opening drive, it was Georgia's game. Point blank, period. They took over. They were able to get back within 4, mainly because Arch Manning was able to make a number of incredible throws and a couple of great catches from Ryan Wingo and company to hope sort of make up for the drops early in the game. But at the end of the day, they were down 4. Arch leads them down the field, throws the great pass to Ryan Wingo. The next time he touched the ball, they were down 18. It was the onside kick. They scored 2 touchdowns, does Georgia, and Arch Manning gets back out there and has to start forcing the football. Now, he still plays pretty good football. He still kind of puts them in positions, but at the end of the day, you're not going to win when you have to force the ball in the air because Kirby Smart and that coaching staff is just too good. They're going to set up different pressures and different things to throw at you, and it's going to be really, really hard to handle. As for Kirby Smart and this coaching staff, he is perfect at knowing when to go into attack mode, when to back off. He plays his team absolutely perfectly. His team fights as hard as any team that he has had. This is one of the better coaching jobs that he's done. I feel like we've said that a number of times the last couple of years, but he's done an incredible job with this team in particular. And every time it feels like he has to make the right coaching decision. He has to step up in the big time moments. He does. He wins the margins. And in this level of college football, especially in this era of college football, you're going to win national championships by winning the margins. That's what Georgia's doing right now. It's exactly what Ohio State did last year and is doing right now with a lot of their load management stuff. And that's something we can talk about as we get closer to the playoff. But let's talk about Arch Manning here for a second, because that's something that's been going around the internet. Whenever this kid doesn't have 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, it's all his fault. It's a lot like the Ty Simpson situation. They're putting way too much on that kid's shoulders. I've watched every game of Texas this season. They've played 10 games thus far. I would bet in at least 7 of those games, Arch Manning has been asked to be an outright superhero for them to win it. He's been able to do it a couple of times. That fourth quarter against Mississippi State is about as good as any quarterback has played for a quarter this season. He did really incredible things against Vanderbilt early in that game, but at the end of the day, they left this kid on an island a lot of this year, especially on Saturday. Multiple drops, I believe 5 drops at the end of the day for this team. They had 9 penalties, and a lot of people complaining about the penalties. The only one that I have a beef with is, I do think on the interception, it was a little bit of a hold on DeAndre Moore. At the end of the day, Texas came into this game as one of the most penalized teams in the country. They got 9 penalties, and under Steve Sarkisian, that's a problem. They need to fix that. That's another thing that when you're a coordinator, when you're a play caller, those details do go by the wayside pretty easily. But again, a conversation for another day. But I thought Arch Manning played incredibly well in this game. I get it. He will be torn apart. He didn't step up to the moment. They only scored 10 points. It doesn't look all that great. That kid has a very, very bright future. And if you have any stock that you would like to sell on that kid, I'd be more than happy to buy it from you, because I think he has a bright future if Texas can do the right things around him in this offseason and moving forward in his career. Now for the other quarterback, because there's something happening in college football that I need someone to explain to me, and I can't imagine there's a good reason for it, but using football knowledge, using football terms, why is Gunnar Stockton not the Heisman favorite, or at the very least in the top 3 with Julian Sayin and Fernando Mendoza? I can't for the life of me figure this out, because all throughout the year, he hasn't played one outright terrible game. He has played iffy games at times, especially early in the year when he was a little bit more tentative. He wasn't really ripping the ball. He didn't play incredible games. In every big moment this year, this kid has stepped up. Even in the Alabama game where they're down, he leads them on a touchdown drive to take the lead, and then Alabama is able to get the ball back, come back down, score a touchdown, and then the game's over. So at the end of the day, the kid had 5 touchdowns in this game. He had 5 incompletions. He had 1 interception. That's a ridiculous play from Anthony Hill. If you go watch that from the back view, it is absurd what Anthony Hill did on that play, and that's just par for the course for Anthony Hill. But at the end of the day, This kid's remarkable. He is special in every sense of the word, and for whatever reason, people keep trying to tell me that he's ninth or eighth or seventh in the Heisman conversation. This is a top 3 quarterback in the country right now. Period. End of story. I really don't see an argument the other direction. Julian saying playing elite football deserves to be in New York as of right now, deserves to be in New York City at the end of the year. Fernando Mendoza, the exact same thing. I would give a vote to Jeremiah Love to be there. And Gunnar Stockton. There's no question in my mind that this kid has been one of the best quarterbacks in the country, one of the best players in the country, and one of the most important players to his team in the country. I don't get it. I don't get why he's not getting all of the Heisman praise, other than he's not this flashy kid that always does the crazy stuff in the press conferences. I don't get it. I'll leave it there for the time being. But this Georgia team is special, plain and simple. I think Brooks Austin puts it perfectly. This Georgia team is a boxer, and Kirby Smart more specifically is a boxer. They throw jabs. They throw jabs and body blows with power, with counter, with running the football, with just doing little things the entire game. And then the second that you're leaning backwards, the second that you let your hands fall, the second that you let your guard down, they throw a mean right hook and knock you out. That's exactly what happened in this game. It's happened a number of times throughout the season. It's happened a number of times throughout Kirby Smart's time at Georgia. This team's a little bit different. It's a very young team. It's a very hungry team. It's not a team that knew the success that some of the past teams did. They can win a national title, plain and simple. And I wouldn't have said that probably 3 weeks ago, if I'm being totally honest. They can win a national title. They can absolutely do that. I don't know if anyone else in the SEC can. So we'll find out what happens there. But at the end of the day, they might not even play in the SEC championship. If A&M or Bama lose another game, they will play in the title. If they don't, they will be sitting on their couch being able to rest up just a little bit more. And then they get a 5 or 6 seed, and we'll see what happens the rest of the way. This is a special Georgia team with a special quarterback. And for whatever reason, that guy's not as of right now, is not getting an invitation to New York. I very much hope he does. But essentially eliminates Texas from contention. We'll get into the crazy scenarios where they could find their way back in on Wednesday or Friday, but let's be honest. They're pretty much out with 3 losses, especially with the craziness the bubble is going to give us. And then finally, we got to talk about USC getting a massive win, 26-21 over Iowa. I've said this probably 3 times this year when we talk about USC wins. It's the most impressive win of Lincoln Riley's era. I know that sounds crazy. It's an Iowa team that not a lot of people respect for whatever reason. It's an incredible, incredible team that plays incredibly physically and has for years. But at the end of the day, people's weird bias against Iowa aside, this is a mentally and physically tough team, and it might be one of the most mentally and physically tough teams that he has ever had, Oklahoma included. They had a lot of great teams over there at Oklahoma. There was a very obvious physicality ceiling. There was very obviously a place that they could not go physically with certain teams. Now, I still think USC has that. I'm not saying that they are Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State. They're the most physical team in the world. They're getting there. And they're finding those strides, and it's a big difference from what we saw last year. I mean, you talk about this team just on the lines of scrimmage, they're totally different. What makes them special is guys like Mekhi Lemon. Let's just be totally honest, though. When we talk about USC, there's a lot to love about the physicality and the mental makeup of this football team. Mekhi Lemon is what makes them special. 10 catches, 163 yards, and a score in this game. The idea that a 6'4", 200-pound, essentially Drake London clone in Jacoby Lane is their wide receiver 2 is just absolutely crazy. Those guys are incredible, and they can do a lot of special things. If they're put into a playoff scenario where it's just a 60-minute battle, it's really hard to keep up with those 2 guys. But a major part of this is 2 kind of mundane drives, 2 drives that really don't turn your head or make you all that interested in the game, just 2 field goals, one before halftime, one right after halftime, and it finds a way to push the lead from 14 to 8, and that was enough. That was enough for that team to look up on the scoreboard and say, we're alive. They get back-to-back touchdown drives. Jakeem Stewart gets a massive INT, really talented freshman. That is a big part of what I'm talking about when I talk about physicality, but this team knows what they're going to do. This team knows what they have to do to get to a CFP, and they're playing like it. It's really, really impressive, especially when all offseason and really all of last year, it was just pile on Lincoln Riley Day, and they just found a way to turn this thing on. Still got a lot of work to do, and we'll talk about that here in a second. For Iowa, it's got to feel a little frustrating. And now, I don't know what Iowa fans were expecting this season. Obviously, Mark Gronowski coming in really did change the way that people felt about that team and what they could do. But once again, you're 8-4, and you're probably inches away from being 10-2 and being in the CFP conversation or just in the CFP altogether. It's got to be really frustrating. Now you get Michigan State, and then you get a massive one against Nebraska. You can finish this thing 8-4 if you're really confident going forward. But at the end of the day, I think it's got to be a little frustrating at times. It's got to be a little tiring at times. I think that team is getting better. I think that program continues to evolve. It's got to be a little bit quicker at times. But we'll see how that develops, obviously, over the next little bit. We'll see how all of that develops, especially around Ferentz and what that future looks like. But for USC, you've earned the right to go up to Autzen and have a shot to win a game, to go to the CFP if you do it. Now, you'd have to beat UCLA after that, and they'd love to knock you out. But at the end of the day, you go up there and beat Oregon, you got a shot. There's no doubt about that. I do want to say something, though. We're going to get into the Oregon breakdown, and I'll give my pick, and honestly, I have not decided who I think is going to win that game. If USC were to lose that game, and then they were to beat UCLA, I think it's a massive win for Lincoln Riley in this program. Hopefully Lincoln Riley sticks around. Josh Pate threw a little bit of a bomb out there a couple weeks ago. I think he'll stick around, but we'll see what happens there. I get it. The goal is the CFP. Whenever you're at USC, the goal is always the CFP, and I do think you can beat Oregon and get there. If you finish this season 9-3 and your team has gotten a ton more physical and it feels like you have way more alignment, and yes, you are going to lose some big-time players this offseason, it just feels like you have a program moving forward. It doesn't just feel like you have Lincoln Riley trying to patch things together, make a cool offense, and try to find your way to 10 wins. I think you have a program that you can build something special at now. We'll see how the season ends. We'll see if they can find a way to the CFP, make it even that much more special. But you got a really good recruiting class coming in. You got a lot of very good coaches in that building, and you're getting wins that you would not get a couple of years ago under Lincoln Riley. I think there's a lot to take away from a 9-3 season. That being said, if I'm a USC fan, I want 10-2, and I want to get a win at Oregon next week, and we'll obviously break that game down on Wednesday, and it's going to be a weird one. I think that one's going to be absolutely incredible, maybe even game of the year potential. Just have that weird feeling. But we'll get into that as it comes, but let's take our first break. And when we come back, we got upset alerts across the board, including just a historic comeback from Texas A&M. Really no other way to put it. And we'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us.